It's good to be with you. Thanks for joining me as we journey through this unit on stewards of God's creation. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and one that I've been growing in over the last 4 years as I began at Everence as a stewardship consultant, providing education and resources to congregations and congregational leaders as we consider stewardship and generosity and what that looks like in our lives. My name is Lana Miller. I grew up in a small town in Indiana, Millersburg, and graduated from Goshen College with a degree in biology and chemistry, which I'm telling you because you might find that interesting as we engage this conversation on creation. I taught high school chemistry before I began in ministry, something that I've been doing for almost 25 years in some form ever since. As adult Sunday school teachers, I appreciate the time that you're giving to prepare for this class, and especially the consideration you're giving for this topic. How we steward what God has entrusted to us is vital in our faith formation. Stewardship at its core is reflective of our relationship with God, with one another, and with this world that we live in. It's fundamental to our spiritual formation. Before I also kind of dig into the lesson, I want to give a special word of thanks to both Joanne Brandt and Ugo Saucedo for their wonderful work in preparing the next 6 lessons. I hope you find their questions and reflections to be beneficial and thought-provoking as you prepare to guide your class. I've found them very helpful. The first session is entitled Meditating on God's Creation. I wonder, when was the last time you simply sat and listened, watched, tasted, used your senses to pay attention to God's creation? My husband joked with me just this last week that my tulips would soon be blooming, and when they did, I should get a chair and sit in front of them for the day. He then added, jokingly, because the wind would most certainly have their way with them and they'd only be in their height of glory for a day. Perhaps it would look peculiar if you saw me in the lawn, facing my house, sitting in a chair, admiring the more than 50 tulips that I have blooming in all their glory. I'll admit it was a funny image for me to also imagine. But it brings me back to this question. When was the last time you simply sat in creation? How often we simply let ourselves be in creation without a purpose, just to watch and listen, pay attention. And when we do, does that shape our faith? Does it shape our understanding of God and our relationship with the world around us? If I were teaching this class, I'd probably invite the class to begin outside. If it weren't raining, well, even maybe if it were raining, bring an umbrella. To simply sit and be in creation and pay attention, as Ugo suggests, using all of your senses to take in what is around you. And if you aren't able to begin outside, you may want to play some nature music, as they suggest, or listen to some songs that draw our attention to nature. Pay attention and celebrate God's creation. So whether you're able to sit outside or you want to begin considering nature from inside, the next question that Ugo asks is, when have you felt most connected to the natural world? Where were you? What were you doing? I think this is an important question for us to just use as an introduction and spend some time reflecting on before we dig into the next 3 questions on that page. What effect has God's creation had on your faith, on your understanding of the divine, on your relationship with all living things around you? What draws you to the natural world, and what interferes with your interaction with the natural world? For me, science and nature have always revealed the complexities of God. They've helped me feel more grounded as I try to understand my place as one small yet vital part of God's world. Noticing the intricacies of what is around me is astonishing. And I marvel, whom is this God we serve? So much more than I can comprehend. Yet I'm also aware that these deeper connections to nature and God aren't always a part of every day for me. I'm not always so intentional about paying attention, and I get distracted by many other things. As you're sharing stories and talking as a class, I'd invite you to take the time you need to wrestle with some of these questions. I think it'll set the stage for conversation about stewardship of God's creation and will help us more fully enter into the upcoming conversations in the weeks ahead. So don't rush it. Even if the answers are slow at first, or maybe if people are so interested in sharing, it takes most of the time you have together, it's okay. This is a valuable conversation that's worthy of time and reflection. So stay with these questions as long as you need to and give a chance for everyone to share. If time allows, transition to reading the Psalm 104 passage. And as you read, note the interconnectedness of each of the parts. Ugo suggests an activity. You may want to do that as a group or as individuals, paying attention to the Psalm reading. What are the images of nature and drawing lines of connection between them? For me, the importance of this interconnected activity is listening to how all the parts are connected. And it provides us a different kind of way of focusing on creation. On page 46, Joanne notes that the emphasis of this psalm is not on how human beings benefit from God's work, but on God's providential care of all beings. This is important and may need some unpacking because many of us tend to see the world in a hierarchical kind of way, consciously or subconsciously. We're humans at the top and perhaps believe that creation's sole purpose is for our consumption. But this psalm challenges that belief. Creation isn't just for human benefit, but it names the importance of God's care for all beings. Joanne later notes that both flora and fauna and even domesticated animals are seen engaged in their daily activity rather than serving human purposes. I think these ideas may create some interesting discussion in your group. To add to this, you may want to go back to some of the daily Bible readings and pick up some of the ideas about how God gave life to everything, that all things were created through God and for God, God's abundance, and how creation shows God's power and divine nature. How do these passages also push back on our human tendency to make ourselves central to God's creation? What would happen if we started viewing God's creation more through a lens of these scripture passages? Perhaps this discussion then leads us to a place of lament, where we consider how our actions, choices, and lifestyles have disrupted what God has created. Ugo again gives us some great activities to think about as we reflect on lament and brokenness. Then, moving from lament to action, I would invite people to consider the changes we might make in our own lives that could contribute positively to God's created order. Again, there's some suggestions on page 49, like turning off the lights. But Joanne also talks about how this generation, or each generation, spends less time outside than the last. So how does screen time impact our connectedness with creation and God? Maybe something you want to explore. There's a lot to unpack in this first session, so don't worry if you don't make it to each of the parts. I would just invite you to pay attention to how we're connected and interconnected with all of creation, how that's been broken, and what we can do to help repair and restore this brokenness. Blessings as you prepare this week.